There are truths out there that most people just aren't ready to hear. Truths that the world actively avoids, like that awkward family dinner conversation. Truths that, once they really sink in, change everything about how you see yourself and everyone else. These are the uncomfortable realizations that old souls carry, often in silence, because they've learned that sharing these truths too freely, well, it just creates more pain. Eckhart Tolle has spoken about this very phenomenon. He describes old souls as those who've accumulated wisdom across many experiences, maybe even many lifetimes. They see what others can't. They understand what others refuse to understand. And this knowing, while it brings a certain peace, also brings a particular kind of burden. Today, I want to share with you 7 uncomfortable truths that only old souls truly comprehend. If you're watching this, there's a good chance, a real good chance, that you're one of them. And if these truths resonate with you, if they feel familiar, even though you may have never put them into words, then you'll know that you're not alone in carrying this ancient wisdom. The first uncomfortable truth is this: most people are not ready to wake up, and many never will be. This is perhaps the most difficult truth for old souls to accept. When you've tasted awakening, when you've glimpsed the freedom that lies beyond the ego, your natural impulse is to share it with everyone you love. You want to shake people awake. You want to show them what you've seen. You want to spare them the unnecessary suffering that comes from living in unconsciousness. But here's what Tolle teaches, and what old souls eventually learn. Through painful experience, you cannot force awakening on anyone. The spiritual path isn't something that can be given as a gift. It must be chosen. It must be walked alone. And many people, maybe most people, are simply not ready to take that first step. This isn't a judgment. It's not a statement of superiority. It's simply an observation of where consciousness currently stands for the majority of humanity. Most people are so identified with their thoughts, their emotions, their roles, their possessions, that the idea of letting go of all of this feels like death. And in a sense, it is. The ego does not survive awakening, and the ego will fight with everything it has to prevent its own dissolution. Old souls understand this, and they've stopped trying to wake people up. Instead, they simply hold space. They remain present. They offer their light without expectation, and they trust that when someone is truly ready, the teacher will appear. Research on spiritual maturity suggests that only a small percentage of the population reaches what psychologists call post-conventional stages of development. These are the stages where a person begins to question the assumptions they've inherited from their culture, where they start to see through the games of the ego, where genuine spiritual awakening becomes possible. The uncomfortable truth is that you may be one of the only people in your family, in your workplace, perhaps in your entire social circle, who has reached this stage, and you cannot pull others along. You can only walk your own path and trust that your presence itself is a gift to those around you. I remember speaking with a woman from San Francisco who had experienced a profound awakening after a near-death experience. She told me that the hardest part was not the awakening itself. The hardest part was returning to her normal life and realizing that no one around her could understand what had happened. Her husband thought she was having a midlife crisis. Her children thought she had become strange. Her friends stopped calling because she no longer wanted to participate in the activities that used to bring them together. She said to me, "I spent years trying to explain what I had seen, trying to share the peace I had found, but every attempt only pushed people further away. It was only when I stopped trying to wake them up that our relationships began to heal. Not because they changed, but because I did. I learned to love them without needing them to see what I saw. This is the first uncomfortable truth, and it may be one of the most liberating ones, once you truly accept it, because once you release the burden of trying to awaken others, you have so much more energy for your own journey. The second uncomfortable truth is that you cannot save everyone. Some souls need to suffer in order to grow. This is a truth that causes old souls tremendous pain, because when you have deep empathy, when you can feel the suffering of others as if it were your own, your natural response is to want to take that suffering away. You want to fix people. You want to heal them. You want to rescue them from their pain. But old souls eventually learn that suffering serves a purpose. Not all suffering, certainly. Much suffering in this world is unnecessary and comes from unconsciousness and ego. But there's also a kind of suffering that is transformative, a kind of suffering that breaks open the hard shell of the ego and allows something new to emerge. Tolle often speaks about his own transformation. Before his awakening at age 29, he suffered from severe depression and anxiety. He contemplated ending his own life, and it was precisely in that moment of unbearable suffering that something shifted. The suffering itself became the catalyst for his liberation. Old souls understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to allow them to experience their pain fully, not to rescue them, not to fix them, not to provide easy answers. That will only delay their growth, but to simply be present with them in their darkness, trusting that this darkness is the fertile ground from which their own awakening may one day emerge. This does not mean being cold or indifferent to suffering. It means having the wisdom to know when intervention helps and when it actually prevents growth. It means trusting that every soul has its own journey, its own timing, its own lessons to learn. There's a Buddhist teaching that says, you cannot enlighten a flower by pulling on its petals. You can only provide the right conditions, sunlight, water, good soil, and then trust the flower to bloom in its own time. The same is true for consciousness. You cannot force it open. You can only create the conditions for its unfolding, and then step back. Old souls learn this lesson, often through many failed attempts. At saving others, they learn that their role is not to rescue, but to witness, not to fix, but to accept, not to carry the burden of others, but to trust that each soul has the strength to carry its own. The third uncomfortable truth is that your wisdom will make you lonely, and this loneliness is part of the path. Old souls are often described as feeling like outsiders, like they don't quite belong in this world, like they're observing life from behind a pane of glass. This sense of separation isn't a flaw. It's a feature of carrying wisdom that most people can't even touch yet. When you see through the illusions that everyone else is invested in, when you recognize the ego games that others play with deadly seriousness, when you know that the things people chase so desperately will never bring lasting fulfillment, you naturally become isolated, not because you choose to be, but because there's simply less common ground between you and those who are still asleep, still stuck in the matrix. Eckhart Tolle acknowledges this. He spent 2 years after his awakening sitting on park benches, largely disconnected from normal social interaction. He was integrating a transformation so profound that ordinary conversation felt almost impossible. Many awakened beings throughout history have gone through similar periods of withdrawal. Think of the Buddha, alone under the Bodhi tree. The uncomfortable truth is that this loneliness may never fully disappear. You may always feel somewhat different, somewhat separate, somewhat unable to fully participate in the unconscious games that make up most social interaction. The water cooler gossip, the keeping up with the Joneses. But here's what old souls also discover. This loneliness, when fully accepted, transforms into something else. It becomes solitude. It becomes a sacred space where you meet yourself most deeply. It becomes the very ground where your continued awakening takes place, a place to recharge and reflect. Research published in the European Journal of Social Psychology found that people with higher levels of spiritual development often experience more solitude. But they also report transforming that solitude into something meaningful through presence, acceptance, and self-compassion. In other words, the loneliness of the old soul isn't a prison. It's a sanctuary, a cathedral of the self, but only if you learn to inhabit it fully. The concept of old soul goes way back. Think ancient wisdom. It resonates with philosophies like Taoism. This viewpoint suggests the soul embarks on a journey through numerous lifetimes to gather experiences. The more seasoned the soul, the more it has witnessed, the greater its understanding, and the more challenging it becomes to find kindred spirits operating on the same wavelength. This isn't arrogance, it's simply mathematics. If genuine awakening is rare, then awakened beings will naturally find themselves in the minority, and minorities, by definition, are often alone. But here's the gift hidden within this loneliness. When you stop seeking connection with others and turn inward, you discover that you are never truly alone. You're connected to something far larger than any human relationship could provide. You're connected to consciousness itself, to the source from which all souls emerge, and this connection, once recognized, is infinitely more fulfilling than any external relationship could ever be. The fourth uncomfortable truth is that the world isn't getting worse. You're simply seeing it more clearly. Many old souls go through a period where they become deeply distressed about the state of the world. They see the violence and the greed, the unconsciousness playing out on a global scale, and they assume that things are getting worse, that humanity is descending into darkness, that some catastrophe is coming, like something straight out of a dystopian movie. But here's what old souls eventually realize. The world has always been this way. What has changed is not the world. What has changed is your ability to perceive it. Before awakening, you were protected by your own unconsciousness. You didn't see the pain because you were too caught up in your own personal drama. You didn't notice the dysfunction because you were participating in it yourself. Your ego filtered out anything that didn't serve its survival. But when you begin to awaken, those filters dissolve. Suddenly, you see suffering everywhere. You notice the subtle cruelty in everyday interactions. You perceive the fear that drives most human behavior, and it can feel overwhelming. Tolle teaches that this clear seeing is a necessary stage. You cannot transcend what you cannot see. You cannot transform what you refuse to acknowledge. The darkness must be witnessed before it can be released. But the uncomfortable truth is that this seeing will not end. You'll never return to the comfortable blindness of unconsciousness. Once you have seen, you cannot unsee, and you must learn to hold space for both the darkness and the light, to see clearly without becoming cynical, to witness pain without losing hope. Old souls learn to do this. They develop what might be called compassionate detachment. They see the world as it is, including all its pain and dysfunction. But they also see something else. They see the consciousness that is slowly awakening in more and more people. They see the love that persists despite everything. They see the beauty that shines through the cracks in the collective ego. This is why old souls often become beacons of peace in chaotic environments. They're not disturbed by what disturbs others. They don't panic when others panic. They've seen enough to know that darkness and light are both part of the dance. That chaos always eventually gives way to order. That even the most intense suffering contains the seeds of transformation. If you find yourself less reactive to world events than those around you, if you can witness tragedy without being destroyed by it, if you can hold space for pain without losing your center, this is a sign of your old soul nature. It isn't coldness, it's wisdom. The wisdom that comes from having seen many cycles of destruction and renewal. The fifth, uncomfortable truth. And it is that your loved ones may never understand you, and you must love them anyway. This is one of the most painful truths that old souls face. You may have family members who think you're nuts, partners who can't follow where your growth is taking you, friends who feel threatened by your changes and pull away, children who see you as strange or embarrassing, the black sheep of the family. The old soul's path often creates rifts in relationships that were formed before awakening. The person you are becoming is simply too different from the person they knew. The conversations you want to have are not conversations they can participate in. The depth you crave is not a depth they can access. They just want to talk about sports scores or the latest celebrity gossip. And the uncomfortable truth is that this may never change. Some of your loved ones may never understand your spiritual journey. They may never see what you see. They may spend their entire lives convinced that you have lost your way, when in reality, you've finally found it. Old souls must learn to love without requiring understanding. They must learn to maintain connection without needing agreement. They must learn to accept that the people they love are on their own journey, at their own pace, learning their own lessons. This does not mean staying in relationships that are truly harmful. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to create distance, but it does mean releasing the expectation that your loved ones will suddenly wake up and see the world the way you do. It means loving them as they are, not as you wish they would be. Eckhart Tolle speaks of this as loving without attachment. When you love someone without needing them to be different, without needing them to validate your path, without needing them to understand your experience, your love becomes unconditional. It becomes a gift rather than a transaction. And paradoxically, this unconditional love is often what creates the space for others to grow in their own time. I have seen this pattern again and again. The old soul who desperately wants their partner to wake up, who keeps recommending books and videos, who keeps trying to initiate deep conversations, and the more they push, the more their partner resists. But when the old soul finally accepts that their partner may never awaken, something shifts, the pressure disappears, the relationship becomes easier, and sometimes, and freed from the burden of expectation, the partner begins to show small signs of their own awakening, not because they were pushed, but because they finally had space to grow. Your love is enough. Your presence is enough. You do not need to transform anyone. You only need to be fully who you are, and trust that your being is the greatest gift you can offer. The sixth uncomfortable truth is that happiness as the world defines it will never satisfy you, not because you are broken, but because you were made for something deeper. Old souls often struggle to find fulfillment in the things that seem to make others happy. Success, money, status, entertainment, romance. These things may provide temporary pleasure, but they never quite fill the void that the old soul feels. There is always something missing, always something more that the soul is reaching for. This can lead to years of confusion. You may wonder what is wrong with you, why you cannot just be content with a normal life, why the things that everyone else pursues seem so empty to you. But the uncomfortable truth is that nothing is wrong with you. You are simply operating from a different level of consciousness, a level where the ordinary satisfactions of ego no longer work, a level where your soul is calling for something that the world cannot provide. Tolle describes this as the longing for being, the deep, often unconscious desire to return to your true nature, to remember what you are, beneath all the layers of conditioning, to experience the peace that surpasses all understanding. This longing cannot be satisfied by external achievements. No amount of success will quiet it. No relationship will complete it. No experience will fulfill it. The only thing that satisfies this longing is presence itself. the direct experience of being, the recognition of yourself as consciousness, rather than the content of consciousness. Old souls eventually stop trying to satisfy this longing through worldly means. They turn inward. They develop a practice of presence. They learn to access that which they have been seeking, in the only place it can be found, in the stillness at the center of their own awareness. This is why old souls often simplify their lives. They stop chasing. They stop accumulating. They stop striving for the next achievement, because they have learned, often through exhausting experience, that none of it works. The only thing that truly satisfies is the peace that comes from being fully present, from resting in awareness, from knowing who you are, beyond all roles and identities. If you have ever achieved something you thought would make you happy, and found yourself feeling empty instead, you know this truth already. If you have ever gotten everything you wanted, and still felt that something was missing, you have tasted this uncomfortable reality. The world cannot give you what you are seeking. Only presence can. The seventh and final, uncomfortable truth is perhaps the most difficult of all. You chose this life, including all of its difficulties. Many spiritual traditions speak of the soul's choice, the idea that before incarnation, we select the specific challenges, relationships, and circumstances that will provide the lessons we most need to learn. This is not a comfortable idea. It means that the suffering you have experienced is not random, not unfair, not a cosmic mistake. It means that some part of you, some higher aspect of your consciousness, looked at this particular life with all its pain and said, yes, said, I will take this on, said, this is exactly what I need. Old souls often have a sense of this. They look back at their most difficult experiences, and they can see how those experiences shaped them, how the trauma became the doorway to wisdom, how the loss became the catalyst for growth, how the very things they most resisted turned out to be their greatest teachers. This does not make the suffering less real. It does not invalidate the pain, but it does transform how you relate to your own life story. Instead of being a victim of circumstances, you become a participant in a profound learning process. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You begin to ask, what is this teaching me? Tolle speaks of accepting what is, of saying yes to the present moment, including all its imperfections. This acceptance becomes much easier when you sense that there is a deeper intelligence at work, that your life, with all its difficulties, is unfolding exactly as it needs to. Old souls carry this knowing. They trust the process, even when it is painful. They sense that every experience God is serving their evolution, and this trust gives them a kind of peace that is not dependent on things going well. There is a profound freedom in this acceptance. When you truly believe that you chose your challenges, you stop being a victim. You stop fighting against your life. You start asking different questions. Not why is this happening to me, but what am I meant to learn from this? Not how do I escape this situation, but how can I grow through it? This does not mean being passive in the face of injustice or suffering. Old souls are often the most engaged people in creating positive change, but their engagement comes from a different place, not from resistance and anger, but from love and understanding. They work to improve the world, not because they hate what is, but because they see what could be. If what you are hearing resonates with you, if you feel that these teachings deserve to reach more awakening souls, consider offering a super thanks. This channel is not just entertainment. It is a lifeline for those who are walking this path, who need to know that their wisdom is not madness. When you support this work, you become part of a silent community of old souls, helping each other remember what we are. These 7 truths are not easy to hold. They challenge our assumptions about the world, about relationships, about the very purpose of our existence. But old souls do not shy away from difficult truths. They know that the comfort of illusion is temporary, while the peace of truth is eternal. If you found yourself nodding as you listened to these truths, if they felt like memories rather than new information, then you know what you are. You are an old soul. You carry wisdom that was not learned in this lifetime alone. And while that wisdom can feel like a burden, it is also your greatest gift. The world needs old souls. It needs people who can see clearly, who can hold space for both darkness and light, who can love without needing to be understood, who can trust the journey. Even when the path is unclear, you are here for a reason. Your presence matters, your wisdom, even when it is silent, is contributing to the awakening of human consciousness. Do not underestimate the power of simply being who you are. The mystics have always known this. That consciousness awakens consciousness. That one truly awakened being can shift the energy of an entire room. That your silent presence, even when no words are spoken, is doing work that cannot be measured or understood by the ordinary mind. Eckhart Tolle would agree. You did not stumble upon this video by accident. There are no accidents for old souls. Everything is synchronicity. Everything is perfectly timed. You are exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn. Before you go, I want to leave you with one final reflection. Which of these 7 truths was the most difficult for you to accept? Was it the knowledge that you cannot wake everyone up, the loneliness of your path, the realization that worldly happiness will never satisfy you? Share your experience in the comments below, not for the algorithm, but because your truth might be exactly what another old soul needs to hear today. Your words might be the permission someone else needs to finally accept what they have always known. These uncomfortable truths are not the end. They are the beginning of a deeper freedom, the freedom that comes from no longer pretending, no longer waiting for others to catch up, no longer trying to be something you are not. You are an old soul, and the world, whether it knows it or not, is grateful that you are here. And as Eckhart Tolle often reminds us, presence is powerful.